Welcome to our video commentary on step 4 of the financial planning process. I have to give you a little bit of a warning. We have a drum lesson going on in the background, and we have a dog in the room. So who knows what could happen, what sounds you could hear, but hopefully it'll be easy and straightforward. Step 4 deals with cash flow planning. If you think about a retirement plan and the implementation of a retirement plan, if you plan to spend a certain amount each year, and you go way over and above that, and you need to take even more money out of your investments each year than you thought because of poor cash flow planning, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to run out of money before you thought you were going to. And so having a clear plan for how to manage cash flow is going to be really critical. In the article, we talk about the 3 walls of separation that can be put in place in order to make cash flow management simpler. And we give the story of the playground at the elementary school. And I'll let you read about that instead of going into specifics about it. Actually, that comes from the actual course, the mini course that we put together on cash flow planning. And I'll provide a link to that in the comments below, but it's at our Thinkific. It's at our Thinkific school where you can take courses, mini courses on. This is called Master Your Money, cash flow planning. So we talk about the story of the playground in the elementary school and the value of erecting fences in order to protect the kids. In the same way that erecting walls or separation to protect our money occurs. We talk about these 3 different walls that we set up. So let's talk about the first wall of separation, and that is having a wall of separation between living expenses and what is not living expenses, or it could be savings in the short term or savings in the long term. You need to have a dedicated account or accounts, plural, for living expenses, but a completely separate account for short-term or long-term savings. And what is critical about the order of the way that you set up the cash flow system is all income needs to come into the account where you want to save your money. And only the amount dedicated for living expenses ever leaves that account at the beginning of each month. As a result, the difference between living expenses and savings automatically gets captured in the account designed for savings. Rather than trying to set a certain amount or send a certain amount of money each month into an account for savings, you need to reverse the order. Reverse engineer it so that everything is savings as it comes in. You only distribute at the beginning of each month the amount dedicated for living expenses to go out of the account. So if you're retired, all of your Social Security income, any pension income, any income that's coming in from dividends or part-time work, every source of income goes into the account that's the savings account. Only the amount that needs to come out each month for dedicated living expenses ever leaves the savings account, so that you capture all of the intended savings. So that we go into much more detail in the actual mini course on Master Your Money, but that's the first wall of separation. The second wall of separation occurs inside of the accounts that you use for living expenses. And there are basically 2 kinds of categories. I've looked at this a lot of different ways over the years, but basically you have what are high control and low control categories of spending. And what I mean by that is there are certain categories of spending you don't have to worry about overspending on them. You're not going to overspend on your mortgage in a moment of weakness. You're not going to overspend on your automobile insurance for the next 6 months in a moment of weakness. So it's a fixed expense, it's a known expense, and it's not an expense you've got to keep an eye on over time. It's a low control expense. A high control expense is something that you tend to overspend on, or you tend to go beyond what you think you do, or it's just hard to maintain control and discipline in that particular category, it's a high control expense. So you need a dedicated checking account just for high control expenses that you want to track. And you can have a completely separate checking account for your low control categories. And guess what? All you've got to do at the beginning of each month is put the right amount into the account and you're done, because you don't need to track those things because you're never going to overspend on them by definition. So second wall of demarcation or line of demarcation, dedicated account for high control expenses, dedicated account for low control expenses. So every single month at the beginning of the month, you've got distribution going out of the savings account for the right amount to go into the high control checking account category. And you also have at the beginning of the month a predefined amount going into the dedicated checking account for the low control expenses. But ultimately, when you look at everything, we only need to maintain control or track or have some kind of dedicated way of managing the high control expenses. So this is our third, what we call wall of separation. So the wall of separation within the last category, these high control category, this high control dedicated checking account. How do we keep control? How do we maintain some level of accountability and current awareness of what's going on in each of these categories? That's the real challenge. So there are lots of tools that are out there, but ultimately, what makes a system effective to keep tabs on a particular spending category? Well, let's think about what makes cash and envelopes effective. What makes cash and envelopes effective if you actually were to use them? One is it visually separates a category from another category. So in other words, if I've got a dedicated envelope with cash for groceries, I'll have a separate dedicated envelope and cash for, let's say, eating out. Well, I can visually see, because each envelope visually separates the category. So what do cash and envelopes do? First, they visually separate categories. So your tool needs to visually separate categories, whether they're cash and envelopes or whether they're a virtual envelope. Whatever system you use, it has to visually separate your categories so you can see them one by one by one. You can't control a category unless you can visually see it being separate from another category. Once it's visually separate, then you can see when money is coming out and when money is going in. And you can see what the actual balance is over time. And you can only do that if you can visually separate one from another category. Ideally, the tool that you use is going to be mobile. It's always going to be with you so that you can look and see what the current balance of this spending category is so that you can make a wise and effective decision and stay within your overall plan. So number one, it needs to visually separate your categories. And number two, it needs to be mobile. It needs to be with you at all times, whatever the tool is that you use, so that you can always know how much is available for a spending category before you actually need to make the decision. That's why cash and envelopes works really well. Of course, you could bring that into the electronic realm as well through a smartphone app. There are lots of good smartphone apps that connect to your bank accounts and allow you to look on your phone to see what the available balance of each of those high control categories is that you need. So that wraps up today. But I would definitely encourage you to check out the link that we have in the comments below. It allows you to access for free the Master Your Money mini course. Helps you understand how to implement this from beginning to end. It's free. You just have to register in order to use it. And if you have any comments, if you have any questions about this video or the principles in the video, just put it in the comments below.